We're trying something different this time. It's called Facebook Live. Most of you might be familiar with that. I personally have not done it yet, but we're going to try it tonight. We have a guest that a lot of you have seen before. She's been on the show many a times talking about PTSD. It's Dr. Jeanne C. Folks. Jeanne, actually, we just did another show not too long ago. Actually, that was the third one, but we just did one recently, and now we're going to do this. And Dr. Jeanne is going to be here to answer all your questions on PTSD. All you have to do is, well, you should already be on the Nutmeg TV Facebook page. So just type them in. If you want them to be anonymous,
absolutely,
please let us know that. Or just by first name basis. So.
Well, we wouldn't be saying more than a first name anyway.
Yeah, so. Yeah. So, well, what I'd like to do is just to start the show off by just, for those that don't know Dr. Jeanne, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Jeanne Folks is a licensed professional counselor and is a clinical director of Connecticut Psychotherapeutic Resources in Avon, Connecticut. It's a private practice dedicated to the treatment of psychological trauma. With 36 years in practice, she sees individuals, couples, and facilitates groups. She is a national workshop presenter, blogger, clinical and forensic consultant. Jeanne also has taught as an adjunct professor a professor of psychology at the Central Connecticut State University and is a clinical instructor at the University of Connecticut School of Medicine. In addition, Jeanne is a certified EMDR therapist and an EMDR IA approved clinical case consultant and master accelerated resolution practitioner. She has advanced training in emotional freedom techniques and is appreciated by clients, students, and consultees alike for insight, skill, and warm humor. Welcome back, Jeanne.
Thanks, Chuck. It's always an honor to be here.
It's always great to have you here. So I think what we'll do is we'll wait for some questions, but in the meantime, we'll touch base on some of the stuff that maybe we've talked about in the past. I know I had a few, I had mentioned EMDR. You want to touch on that maybe, just to let them know what EMDR is?
Sure. I'm sure many people with PTSD have heard about EMDR. It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It is the use of the natural inclination in the brain to fire alternately when in REM sleep. And all of our brains do it. And as that's going on, the subconscious is trying to rewire and resolve problems and make sense of things. And Francine Shapiro, the psychologist who developed EMDR, began experimenting with what if I created that bilateral stimulation in the brain when a person was wide awake rather than asleep. And that can be done through mimicking the eye movements, through watching the therapist's hand with a person's eyes, to mimic what the eyes do during REM sleep. There can be alternate sounds with a person wearing headphones. It can be tapping on the hands alternately. And in the process of pulling up that mechanism in the brain goes, this is very strange. I'm usually asleep when this is happening, but it's also incredibly familiar. So, okay. And you gain greater access to deeply held traumatic material, but you access it in a way that's strangely tolerable so that it can be reprocessed and a lot of repressed feelings about a trauma can be released.
Yeah. I know there's a number of treatments that you go through. That would be a whole nother show.
Right.
That popped into my head because
Sure.
During the introduction, I said, well, let's talk about that first.
Absolutely.
We do have one question from a viewer. CBD oil, is it helpful for PTSD?
Well, that's a tricky one. CBD oil is part of the marijuana plant, but it has the molecular components that make you high removed. So it's simply those components in the marijuana plant that reduce inflammation. It can be very helpful in some cases for anxiety and depression, and it can also be very helpful for physical pain. And it's interesting how many people with PTSD have kind of a fibromyalgia-like sense of muscle aches and joint inflammation. The whole body just seems really irritated and upset a lot. Yeah. And CBD oil can be helpful for that. I would certainly talk to my physician or to talk to a naturopathic physician to get more guidance on its use.
Yeah. It's remember, to the viewers, please call in, or actually don't call in, type in, type in on Facebook, and we're here for any and all questions on PTSD.
Yeah.
One of the things we hear, the person that has PTSD, the question is, always, especially those that were, in the military, even first responders, strong, always, the protectors we were talking about before, and they consider themselves a weak person. And am I a weak person?
It's really, really common for people to go there. We did talk about this a little bit last time when we were talking about families. Ironically, many people with PTSD are extraordinarily brave individuals, and they have this belief that they can just gut their way through their symptoms. And when that doesn't work out according to plan, then they can make some very false and unfortunate attributions towards themselves. But no, you're not a weak person. You have a disruption in your fight, flight, freeze mechanism in the body. And it is, in large part, a physiological phenomenon where stress hormones like adrenaline are vastly overshooting the mark for very minor triggers because our system doesn't want to take chances. It says, I know how bad can be now. Yeah. And now that I know how bad can be, I hear a noise, I'm startled, I see something, I smell something, I hear something, and I'm just not going to mess around. I'm going to go into full battle-ready mode to either fight my way, out or through it, or to run as fast as I can to get away, or to go into complete shutdown and freeze. I think another thing that the viewers would be very, very interested in, I get the question a lot about how triggers work. And there's a lot of new research going on right now in how the brain functions, especially in terms of how memories are held in the brain. And one of the things that we're learning, which is really fascinating, is that when we have a memory, not just bad memories, but any memory, your last birthday party, the smells that you had in that memory are held in one part of the brain. The sounds associated with that memory are held in another part of the brain. The sensations Physical sensations are held in yet another part of the brain. And the narrative of the story is held in yet a different part of the brain. So every time, no matter what the memory is, that we're calling up a memory, our brain has actually got such a remarkable filing system, it opens all of the appropriate file drawers and reassembles the memory in our brain. And all we're saying is, it was a great birthday party and we had cake and it tasted good, and then we sang and it sounded great, and there were flowers out in the garden and they smelled wonderful. But when you think about all of these different pieces of memory held in different file cabinets in our head, it then begins to make more sense that if suddenly somebody is in a situation where they smell charred wood, or they smell mold, or they smell a certain perfume, or they have a certain sensation on their skin, that may be enough, and the brain will then hook up all the other pieces of a memory that went along with that. And that's why somebody can go for quite a long time being pretty okay, and then suddenly something happens, they're triggered, and all of a sudden they are deep in an old traumatic memory with all the pieces recombined, even though it may have been triggered only by one sensory input.
Yeah.
And so it's not crazy. It is the phenomenon of the brain, which is so much more complex than we fully understand, and little by little we're knowing more and more.
I actually have a very interesting question myself. I'm not going to type it.
Okay.
I'm just going to present it. And while I'm doing that, please don't hesitate to type in a question.
Now's your chance.
Yeah, for Dr. Jeanne. Once again, it could be remain anonymous. Anything that you've always wanted to ask, you didn't know how, or you didn't have anybody to ask the question to, now's your time. So please type your questions in, and we're here to answer, or Dr. Jeanne's here to answer those questions. Now, everything connected with the brain. Now, traumatic brain injury. How could, I guess every case is different.
It is.
How does a traumatic brain injury affect PTSD? Because what happens is you're rattling all those areas we just talked about.
Right.
It could either make it worse or better, or no change at all.
Right. Well, traumatic brain injury is so complicated because it depends on where the injury happened. Did it happen in the back of the brain? Did it happen in the front of the brain? And depending on where the injury is in the brain will dictate to a large degree what's compromised. But it's absolutely possible to, unfortunately, have the combination of PTSD and a TBI. And, that's a boatload of struggle. But as you're treating one, you're also helping the other. Making any piece of trauma better makes everything better. So I have found, and it's good that we talked briefly about EMDR at the beginning, I have found EMDR enormously helpful with traumatic brain injuries. A person who's blind or deaf or has one of their senses compromised will tell you that their other senses become heightened. With a traumatic brain injury, the brain can often find alternate pathways to do various tasks, such as a common symptom with traumatic brain injury would be problem with short-term recall, problem remembering things, problem retrieving words. And, it was right on the tip of my tongue and I can't get it right now. A lot of, cognitive struggles that look a little bit like learning disabilities. And oftentimes with something like EMDR, the brain can find new pathways to do some of the same tasks. Maybe not 100%, but to certainly make it better. And the other thing that therapy can really help with TBIs is to reduce the anxiety about it, because we know that anxiety makes any other symptom worse. And if you're worrying about, I'm not going to remember that, and I'm terrible with words now, and I can't remember what I was going to say, and I get so worried about it that I actually make it happen more. So to be able to calm down and self-soothe actually helps the primary problem lessen, and then the person's confidence can build.
It's so complicated. You know, it just, I mean, I was just wondering as we're talking, as you're talking, PTSD, can it actually be altered from a pre-existing traumatic brain injury? Because you know, the areas, like you said,
Yeah.
it could be stored in certain areas.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily from a previous traumatic brain injury, but certainly we know that many people with PTSD have had traumas earlier in their life. I mean, we got the first really big studies after Vietnam, and we learned conclusively that soldiers who had a lot of trauma in their childhoods were more prone to combat PTSD and had a rougher road and a longer road to recovery than those soldiers that had PTSD but were relatively uncompromised prior to their wartime experience.
You know, we talk about, I mean, this is the Veterans Corner. I mean, our primary focus is on our veterans.
Absolutely, and rightly so.
You know, there's, I mean, PTSD is, there's no boundaries. The next group that's actually probably equal to veterans is first responders.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if you're actually anyone out there that is experiencing symptoms of PTSD, you don't have to be a veteran.
You do not.
It could be a car crash that you went through a year ago. It could be the fact that you were a first responder, police, EMT, fire, and the other first responders.
Any situation where you feel trapped and your life threatened can create the symptoms of PTSD, up to and including witnessing something horrible happening in your presence that you're not directly involved with, but you're witnessing it, and there is nothing you feel like you can do to save the person or change the situation. So I have seen people who've witnessed horrible events also have PTSD. And they need a lot of affirmation that their PTSD is legitimate.
Yeah.
And when you see something terrible happening to somebody else in a situation where you're helpless to move or change anything, it in essence is also happening to you.
Yeah. It's another question that I've heard. And once again, please don't hesitate. We probably have about 7 or 8 minutes left. Get your questions in. Don't hesitate, please. Another question that I've heard is, you know, those that have PTSD and they may be fine for a while, and then all of a sudden they go from 0 to 60,
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
You know, can you explain how that?
Yeah. Well, there's actually two questions in that.
Yeah.
One is, how can somebody go along for a little while and be okay, and then suddenly they're very not okay? And how can somebody who already clearly knows they have PTSD but are, you know, just having a very ordinary, you know, calm day, and suddenly their heart speeds up, and, you know, they're seeing spots in front of their eyes, and they're deep in some kind of flashback experience. And that goes to the dysregulation in the body. These stress hormones, the adrenaline, the cortisol, are haywire. And, you know, they can just take off randomly, and it's really disturbing for the person to whom that's happening, and to people around them seeing that happen. But the best thing you can do is stay calm and have a toolkit already prepared of skills to use to self-soothe and calm.
Once you recognize the fact that you are going 0 to 60.
Yeah, exactly. I can feel my heart speeding up. I can feel I'm starting to sweat. I am not okay. I am so not okay. I am really not okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. The more you can build the habit in, okay, I've got to use my skills, use my skills.
Breathe.
Breathe. You know, find those tapping points, you know, use your imagery. You know, if you're using a scent, you know, pull out your lavender oil and start breathing it. You know, hold your worry stone. There's 1,000 tricks.
Yeah.
But whatever your tricks happen to be, use your tool bag to help bring your system down.
Now, you had mentioned just a minute ago about tapping, EFT,
Absolutely.
emotional freedom techniques.
Absolutely.
Can you give the viewers a real quick? Yeah, just
Okay.
points.
Alrighty. So, I'll give you a couple of tried and true points. These are acupuncture points directly connected to the central nervous system. So by tapping on them, you're actually telling the central nervous system to calm down, that it's okay. One of the favorite points is called karate chop. It's this little chubby side of your hand right here where you cut the board. That's why they call it karate chop. And it doesn't matter which hand. 3 fingers on the side of the hand, just tappy, tappy, tap. Hang out there. See if you feel inclined to take a deep breath. And if you don't worry about it. This is very, very new to you. You know, there are points around the bony orbit of the eye, the beginning of the eyebrow, the outside of the eye, under your nose, under your lip, right below the pointiest part of your collarbone in that little dip. Your side, about 4 inches from your armpit on the side seam of your shirt. And pinky side to pinky side on your wrists together. You could either tap it with your hand below karate chop right there. And you'd be hanging out on each one of these points, seeing if a deep breath just wants to show up, and the more you do it, the more you will start breathing more deeply. You may start yawning, your stomach might start gurgling a little bit, and your eyes may start to water. Those are all signs actually that your central nervous system is letting go. So as you're having this distressing thought or feeling, you're also manually calming the body down at the same time. So you're actually slowly, if you do it consistently, helping the dials to reset a little bit and find your old normal a little bit more.
We've done this a little bit, and and I can tell you that it works. You get into a stressful situation, you're getting cranked up. Stop and even you don't really have to tap all the time. You can just kind of put the pressure points on those areas.
Yeah. If you're in a public place, you can just pulse a little bit. And when you think about it, we have intuitively been doing this for centuries. People, do this. They do this. We have instinctively found these points and have been stimulating them all the way along. So there's a whole host of culturally acceptable gestures that allows you to cheat in public.
We've actually only got, the 25-minute segments go by pretty fast.
So could I tell you about one more trick? How much time do we have?
Absolutely. We've got maybe about 2.5 minutes.
Perfect. Because I want to tell you a magic formula. Earth, air, water, fire. When you're in trouble with your symptoms, just remember earth, air, water, fire. Earth is to remind you to ground. Get your feet flat on the floor. Feel the earth solid underneath your feet. The earth is there, it's solid, it's not moving, you're gonna be okay. Air is the easy one, remember to breathe. Water, and this is gonna sound a little weird, but either just sip some water out of a cup and really follow the sensation of the water going into your body, or actually consciously produce some saliva. You know, try it later after the show is over. But if you just try and work up a little spit, you'll realize it's very hard to think about something else at the same time. And that's just another little calming cheat. And then the fire is to remember to use the fire of imagination and creativity. Write, make music, paint, go for long walks, find your old camera and bring it out and start taking pictures. Do something creative and meaningful that gives your life a sense of meaning and purpose in a new way. You may even discover a new creative outlet that you didn't even know you had before. But find means of expression that has meaning and significance to you, and it will help you to calm down.
Ways of, we all know ourselves, everybody's different. Ways that where you can, get away. There was, I think we have time for one more real quick one. Getting mad when you're startled. I think that's a common thing with people with PTSD or symptom.
Yeah, people wonder why they get mad when they're startled. And the reason a lot of us get mad when we're startled, especially when we have PTSD, is that all those fight or flight hormones are coming up. So somebody startles me, I'm ready to punch someone.
Yeah.
And so when you see the logic of it and realize, okay, this person just came up the stairs really quietly and I didn't hear them, so I was really startled when I saw them in the doorway. But they actually didn't do anything bad to me.
Yeah.
That these are old feelings, and so I really don't need to bite that person's head off. But I do need to honor the fact that, all of these hormones are now coursing through my bloodstream, getting me ready to fight a battle for my life.
Yeah.
And so what do we remember? Yeah. Earth, air, water, fire.
But Jeanne, I hate to do this, but I'm getting a word that we've got about 20 seconds left.
Okay.
So you want to do this?
Please feel free to call me about my workshop on September 22nd at Wisdom House in Litchfield, Connecticut. Poems and Prayers for the Earth. We will be exploring a lot of those creative tools that, in really fun ways, that we talked about. And you'd be very welcome, and I have scholarship money available.
Okay, you know what? That's all the time we have. We want to thank once again, Jeanne. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Once again,
John.
it's an honor. We want to thank you, the viewers, for watching. I hope you found this very informative, when I'm sure you did.
And thanks for your great questions.
Yep. And I'm Chuck Wooden. See you next time in the Veterans Corner. Good night.